Hello and welcome to the Situation Report today. Very glad to have you joining me. This is the show where we do our best to give you the information and perspectives you need to navigate an ever-changing culture. My name is Jeremy Stallnecker, and looking forward to sharing this great interview with you. If you have children and you look at your kids and you ask the question, and if you have kids, you should look at them and ask this question, what will the world be like when they grow up? And what am I doing right now to get them ready? I think about this all of the time. As someone with young adult kids, I think about it even with my young adult kids. What am I doing to help them right now? But my teenage kids, I'm constantly going through this in my mind. What am I doing right now to help them to move into a world that is increasingly crazy? This is a world where the culture is constantly changing, and we need to have the right resources as well as perspectives to navigate what's in front of us, but perhaps more importantly, to help those who are coming up behind us know how they can navigate what's happening. And man, I'm very grateful to be able to bring a conversation to you with two folks who are doing this. And they have created a series that you are probably familiar with. If you're not, you need to be familiar with. My guests today are Daniel Harmon and Connor Boyack. Daniel Harmon, you're probably familiar at least with the last name. I've had the opportunity to interview two of his brothers in the past. They have created, developed Angel Studios. If you're not familiar with Angel Studios, you've heard of their marquee show, The Chosen. They are the creators, producers of The Chosen. Their studio produces that show, as well as many, many other shows and series of shows. Incredible work, very focused on shining light, and they'll talk about this even in this interview, but Daniel is, for our purposes today, the creator and executive producer of the Tuttle Twins show, which is a series aimed at children. It's a cartoon series with the purpose of teaching and training them about so many issues, from how our system works here in the United States to economics, many other issues they need to develop an understanding about. He is the executive producer. We also have on with him Connor Boyack. Connor is the author of the Tuttle Twins, and he's written more than 40 books. He has written, as a part of those 40 books, the Tuttle Twins book series, and does a lot of other great work. These two men and their teams and many other folks connected to them are on the front line of really helping families to understand what they need to teach, how they need to equip, and then providing the resources to do that. Very, very grateful to have them on, and I trust that this interview will be a help to you with my guests, Daniel Harmon and Connor Boyack. Daniel and Connor, thank you for joining me. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
This is, such an important conversation. There are many different directions we could go with this, but when we look at speaking specifically about children and then beyond that, the influence of culture on our kids, the influence of media on culture on our kids, all that's happening, it's hard to find a starting point. So let's take two steps back maybe. Talk about the Tuttle Twins. Connor, if you want to start here, or Daniel, where this came from, why this was something that you would focus on. Connor, you've written, I think, 50 books or something like that. You're very involved. 40 books. It'll be 50 soon, trust me. You're very involved politically. You guys have done a lot of work, but really drilled down on this specifically. So maybe talk about the genesis of that, where that came from, and then we'll kind of move from there.
Sure, of course. So I'll kick that off. It starts with me and my friend Elijah, who's our illustrator, back in 2013, so a decade ago. We were kicking around this idea of doing a kids book together. Meanwhile, I'm talking to my oldest son, who was like 5 or 6 at the time. And he was asking, Dad, what do you do all day? And I'm running this nonprofit think tank that's, that's changing laws. And I'm like, I don't know how to tell a 6-year-old that I'm fighting eminent domain or that I'm, combating socialist policies. So I literally went on Amazon and I'm like, books that teach about free markets for kids. There's nothing. So that really kind of sharpened the desire that Elijah and I had to say, like, hey, maybe there's something here. Let's give it a try. what's very curious about our first early years of doing the Tuttle Twins books, trying to build the brand, get people to pay attention to us, get the books, read and learn with their kids, is that there was no, I'm going to say there was no strategy around it. It was just a fun little side project. It's like, yay, let's do another book. This is fun.
Right.
Well, when 2020 hit, everything changed. Our sales just went through the roof. So many parents were like, I don't know what's happened to this world. You know, I took things for granted, I guess. I feel like the foundations are all shifting around. I need to know what I can do, you know, with my kids and for my family. And so it changed everything. It really put us into a position of building out a mission and a focus around this, turning it into a very strategic project, partnering with Daniel and his team to kick off a cartoon. And so where before this was just a fun little project, it's one of those things when preparation meets opportunity. We had been doing this for a while. The world falls apart in 2020. Everyone's looking around like, what do we do? What do we do? And we kind of raise our hand like, oh, hey, we're over here. And things have just kind of gone gangbusters ever since.
Daniel, when you look at a project like this, and obviously your studio has done so much from The Chosen and the other projects you're involved in, I always have to bring up Dry Bar Comedy because that's probably my favorite thing that you guys do. I should be more spiritual than that, but that is my favorite thing that you guys do. But you guys have pushed so much forward that really is pushing back against a lot of culture and a lot of what culture is telling us we should care about and should think about. When you look at this from a production standpoint, a studio standpoint, you've got to get the money behind it. There's so many things that have to be invested in a project like this. How do you think about something like this?
First and foremost, I think it needs to be something that is good enough that kids choose to watch it, in the case of the show, over their options, their other options in entertainment like Netflix and Disney Plus and YouTube. And so that's always kind of been the vision for the show, is to add elements of fun, adventure, comedy, and really great characters so that kids are just drawn into it while they're getting the same lessons. And then so much of the success of Tuttle Twins has been because of the model that Angel Studios has of being able to crowdfund something that would not exist if it was up to Hollywood executives to put a stamp of approval on it. Oh yeah, let's make a show about freedom and economics for 6 to 12-year-olds. I mean, they're just they're not going to do that. But we were able to go to the crowd, and we're able to put together a pilot episode based off of the first book that Connor had written, The Law, which covers the principles outlined by Frederick Bastiat about rights to life, liberty, and property. And we're able to make a really compelling story around that. And we didn't even finish up the animation. We just did it in an animatic form, meaning it was a collection of storyboards that were edited together with temporary voices and music and all those things. And then we put that out there in front of the crowd, and we're able to raise $3.7 million from over 8,000 people, where a bunch of them were even saying, I don't even care if I make my money back. This just has to exist for my kids and for my grandkids. And so people were investing and really excited about being able to kind of take the reins on not only their kids' education, but the media, the culture. We can either complain about the culture or we can create it, and that's kind of what this show is born out of.
Yeah, that's good. I hate so much of what's happening in our culture, particularly as it pertains to children. Adults making the decisions that they choose to make or not, to me, is separate of forcing, those, I would say, anti-God agendas on our children. And so it breaks my heart to see so much of it. So that's one thing. However, I do feel like the fact that so much of this, particularly the gender stuff, and we can talk about socialism and all of these things, there's so much out in the open right now that my perception is a lot of folks, parents, grandparents who have not been paying attention are now paying attention. And so we can say this is all negative and I hate, so many of these things. But in a sense, so my family, I'm, very conservative Christian family. We like Disney stuff. We subscribe to Disney Plus. And about a year ago, I sat my kids down. I'm like, we're not doing this anymore. I can't contribute money to, and I know you're not watching those shows, but I can't contribute money to their larger agenda. And even as someone who's very aware, we homeschool our kids, I'm very involved in their lives, that was kind of a wake-up call for me. how do you think about that? Do you feel like that has been the case, that has helped us to have conversations about parenting and teaching young children, even about how the world works and how law works and what they should think? Or is that not relevant to what we're working on right now or you're looking at right now?
I think it's absolutely relevant. To me, what keeps me up at night on this issue is these parents going back to sleep, if you will, and kind of plugging themselves back into the matrix. Yeah. So I think of Glenn Beck and his 9/12 movement, right, after 9/11, trying to have unity and bring everyone together. There were chapters all over the country. There were people popping up doing this, and then it fizzled. And then the Tea Party happened, right? And things were crazy, and we changed a bunch of people in Congress. There were rallies and everything, and then everyone goes back to sleep. Right. And then Common Core happens, and it's like this spike of activity. Right. So what I'm most worried about right now is that, yes, we've seen a lot of parents wake up. We've seen a lot of people red-pilled. We've seen a lot of them kind of awoken to action. What I worry about is that as time goes on and life continues and things normalize, hopefully under the old normal, not the new normal, that many of these parents will go back to sleep. What I often say when I'm out speaking to parent groups is I say, you will lose every war that you don't know is being fought. And what I think a lot of parents have woken up to is this reality that we are in a mind war. It's psychological warfare, and our kids, their minds are ground zero. And if we're not empowering them with armor and weaponry and knowledge about who the enemy is and how they can defend themselves and fight back, maybe, right? If we're not doing that, they'll become a casualty. So to me, this is this kind of meta, battle that we're in. And so many parents don't know themselves, or they don't really kind of see through all the muck in our society and really get what's going on. And so they're just going to get plugged back into the system and move on. So what I'm most desirous about with Tuttle Twins and other work that I'm involved in is kind of maintaining the momentum and keeping people engaged and active and energized to fight for change and not just go back to sleep.
Yeah. Okay, so then I guess this is a very simple question, but how do we do that? Because we do fall back asleep, right? And I'll defend parents everywhere. It's not always falling back asleep as much as it is just getting so distracted with everything else that's going on in life. There's an emergency because they're teaching trans ideology stuff in elementary schools. I need to address that, and I've addressed it, and now I'm going to move on and forget that happened. How do you keep that in front of people in a way that is constructive and not destructive? We were just talking about this a few minutes ago before the show started, that so much of even right-leaning media is screaming about problems all of the time. Like it's anxiety producing, right? There's no solution, there's no answer. And so what I want to do then is shut that off. I just don't want to listen to it. Like, it's going to be fine. I bring my kids home. We're teaching them at home. We go to church. We've got our church friends. We've got our thing. And so I'll just isolate everyone and not deal with it, which is not the right answer, obviously. So how do we keep that in front of people in a constructive way?
Daniel, you have thoughts? Or you want me to go?
No, I can speak to this one a little bit. I think repetition is very key. As a father of 7 kids, you have a certain age where you approach certain subjects with kids. Like, for example, the birds and the bees, right? And that's going to be maybe dependent a little bit on the child's questions and things like that. But if you only ever have one conversation with them about it, it's probably not going to stick nearly as much as the conversations they're getting from their friends and from school and different places like that. So much of it really is the repetition. And thank goodness that Connor has written 40 books on these matters in the way there's like ways to dive deeper. Like we have now with season 1, we've got 12 episodes that are in release, and now 2 episodes in release on season 2. And it just gives more opportunities to create the conversations that need to happen around the dinner table between parents and kids, where there's real critical thinking, where there's real application of things like free markets, inflation, entrepreneurship. Those kinds of things can sink in much more when there's that repetition. There's never, like Connor said, there's never a one and done. If we go back to sleep, it's just going to be back to the same thing. Yeah. You kind of have to focus and refocus and constantly remember and remind.
Yeah. I'll maybe add an exclamation point to that, Jeremy. It brings to mind a story of John Adams and his wife Abigail, who would write each other very prolifically during all the events of the American founding. And in particular, after the Revolution, the French were going through their own kind of revolutionary period. A lot of Americans were excited. Jefferson and others thought that this was kind of the next extension of the American Revolution. But John Adams was worried, and he wrote to his wife Abigail. He was very worried. He said that there are so many people who are so quick and eager to tear down the institutions of society, but is there anyone out there who knows how to build up their replacement? Like, it's so easy to, watch Rome crumble or to see the decay in our society, but what are we doing to know what to build up in its place? Yeah. So for me, a lot of this comes down to the fact that I think we need to be, just as Daniel said, through repetition, really be supporting parents. Frankly, I used to call the Tuttle Twins children's books. Now I call them, I don't know, I'm figuring out what to call them, but they're more like family education resources, because well over half of the parents who get our books for their kids tell us that they're learning new things themselves for the first time. And so we're trying to bring entire families together. Like Daniel said, more discussion around the dinner table, more critical thinking. I think we need to rebuild social fabric in our society where it's very weak and tattered. And so because the societal institutions are crumbling and things are really weakened in our society, I think we need to build up in its place. So how do we do that? I think it's just supporting parents to be present as you are with your kids as much as possible, homeschooling, being intentional with them, providing them with resources to empower them to do that, to kind of shield their kids from the woke and the weird stuff going on. But more than anything, like Daniel said, really focus on the critical thinking, really try and encourage skepticism of the government, learning history, understanding our rights, understanding how the world works. And so that's, through the cartoon, the books, our podcast, so many other things. That's where the Tuttle Twins is just trying to be a kind of a support for parents who themselves maybe feel inadequate because they didn't learn this stuff very well when they were younger. So it's just like, hey, just watch some cartoons and read a book and have some discussion, easy peasy, but plant those seeds and then rinse and repeat over the months.
That's good. Connor, what do you see as, when you look at the landscape of, we'll just talk about the United States right now, what are the major issues that you look at and say to yourself, we've got to address these or we're going to lose it? I'm sure there's some things that scare you, that cause you to write not only children's books or family resources, but do the advocacy work and the other work that you're involved in. What are the big issues? These are the ones that we have to deal with.
This is a fun question. I like this question. I'm trying to figure out how much
I like to have fun as much as possible. Yeah, it could probably be a pretty big list, but if you had to knock down a few of them, what would they be?
So no, I've given some thought to this. I'll focus on two. The first is I think government should be out of the education business. Yeah. I think the modern schooling experiment, its architects were socialist progressives, atheists, secular humanists. The John Deweys and Horace Manns, it was all about collectivism for them. They literally wanted to pull children away from their parents and socialize them in a way that would be more supportive of the society that they wanted to build. I wrote a book a few months ago on this topic called Children of the Collective, highlighting how historically collectivists have always gone after the kids, how they're doing it today, and what we can do to protect our kids and stop them. And I think a huge part of that, there's a pastor, I can't remember his name, but he has the quote where he says, can we as Christians really be shocked when we send our children to Caesar's schools and then they return home as Romans? Yeah. Like we shouldn't be surprised by this. And yet so many are, we're a good Christian conservative family. Why are our kids left-leaning social justice warriors now, right? And then, so I think as much as possible, it's homeschool, micro school, private school, not letting these government, what I sometimes will say indoctrination centers. And that's not to malign teachers. I know so many amazing teachers. They sign up to inspire kids and educate kids. They're sincere people. But the system of which they are a part was architected long ago by people with very specific intentions who do not share my values. So I think that's a big thing, is because the government schools are just pumping out generations of mediocrity. I have a book coming out in a couple of weeks, actually, called Mediocrity, 40 Ways That Government Schools Are Failing Our Kids. And it's being published on the 40th anniversary of a report during the Reagan administration that said at the time, 40 years ago, that there was a rising tide of mediocrity that threatened to overwhelm America's foundations. And that if a foreign government had attempted to impose on America the very mediocre educational performance we now have today, we might have viewed it as an act of war. As it stands, we've allowed this to happen to ourselves. They said that in 83,
Can you
40
define
years
mediocrity?
ago.
What does mediocrity mean in that context?
So in that, they're saying a rising tide of mediocrity is just substandard education outcomes. Basically, we're producing generations of ignoramuses who don't understand history, their rights, proper role of government, economics, free markets, property rights, all the rest. So
it's acceptable, right? And it's been made acceptable.
Well, it's normal.
Pushing kids through
like,
schools.
Pushing
kids through schools and no education.
Yeah. So to me, that's number one. Daniel will like my number two. My number two is we need to audit and end the Federal Reserve. And I bring that up in this context for a very important reason. So for those who don't know, the Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States. They basically are the source of all the inflation we're now experiencing. They create money out of thin air, which has the effect of diluting the purchasing power of all the money currently in circulation. Well, I read a book a couple years ago called The Bitcoin Standard. But the first half of the book was not about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency at all. It was just about money. And it was looking at history through the lens of hard money and soft money. Hard money is like gold, silver, things that can't easily be counterfeited, printed and so forth. Soft money is, paper currency where the government. So what was really interesting is that he looked back through history and pointed out how in periods where hard money was being used, the gold standard, that the family was strong. And that in periods where you have weak money, the family is weak. And the reason why, he says, is that, think of today. Right now, inflation is happening, and you know that if you hang on to your $100, your $1,000, your $100,000, it's going to be worth far less in the future. Right. So you become incentivized to spend things now and buy things. And so it's called, in economics, it's called discounting your future. And so what happens is you're no longer investing in your kids, your grandkids, your posterity. You're blowing all your money, and then when you get old, you're dependent upon the government to take care of you, and so the government grows. Whereas with hard money, what you look at in society is the families become strong because they know that if they put in effort and time and energy right now, they're going to be able to build up treasure. They're going to be able to preserve wealth. They're going to benefit their family, leave a legacy. And so to me, as I look at, I ultimately think it comes down to if you corrupt the money, you corrupt the society, because money is a social lubricant that allows us to interact with one another. And if you are allowing all these shenanigans to happen and you're basically taking money away from people through inflation, you're ultimately weakening families. And so that's not a common answer for a question like this, but I think Henry David Thoreau has that quote where he says, for every 1,000 hacking at the branches, there's one striking at the root. And so for me, those two are big roots. It's how we educate the rising generation and how we manage money as a society.
Yeah, that's good. Daniel, what are your top issues that you're focused on?
Well, I'm going to say amen to both of Connor's. Those are better than I can come up with. But I think so much of what I'm focused on, obviously, is just trying to create culture that captures and transfers the values that I hold dear as a father to for my kids. So much of what has been created out there doesn't. I've always been a lover of cartoons. Love them. My kids love them. The stories are so much fun. Been a big Disney fan. I remember watching The Lion King as a kid, and that having a huge impression on me. Toy Story and the like. The really classic ones going back, and then kind of watching what the stories that are being told and sort of the messages that are coming through, and so much of it is so hidden and often probably very sneaky and just not reflective of my values, for example, as a conservative Christian. And so again, I can complain about that, or I can create it. That's ultimately why I decided to get involved and head up the creation of this show. Was I kind of looked at the landscape of what was going on and said, if I don't do this, who's going to? Where is this going to come from? And that's ultimately when my team and I decided to sit down with Connor and really start those discussions. Is like, we've got to make this thing happen, and we can do it in a way that's really, really impactful. That's really fun, and it's really fun to see families and kids resonating with it and giving it really good reviews and getting engrossed in it in the same way that they do their other storytelling brands, for example. So that's been really fun.
You have been involved in, huge media campaigns and production of incredible shows and so forth. You've been very successful in the media realm. As conservatives and as Christians, what should a family look at, or how should they think about media? I was sitting on the couch yesterday or a couple days ago and turned on the TV, and everything streams, so it's all apps, right? There's it just hit me like there are so many streaming apps, and I don't subscribe to most of them, but they're all there right on the menu. There's no shortage of media, and I think we can turn our brains off and go, well, it's all probably pretty good or pretty much the same or whatever. From someone who does this and does it with purpose and not just to make money, not just for the bottom line, how would you tell families and parents to think about the media that they're consuming, the media they're allowing their family to consume, the things they're allowing themselves to get involved in?
So ironically, it sometimes takes a lot of hard work to find things to pass the time with it. You're looking for your media to be an escape, right? To be a downtime, to be something where you can really enjoy yourself with your family. And that sometimes takes a lot of hard work to find the stuff that's really great out there. Right. And obviously there's companies like Angel Studios that are actively pushing for stories that amplify light. Yeah. And there's others out there that are doing it. And thank goodness, this space is becoming more and more competitive, and there's becoming more and more offerings there. And we're seeing, I think, a little bit of a cultural shift in the pendulum, that it's swung really far one direction, and now there's an opportunity for it to kind of swing back a little bit. And so that's exciting. But I think it is, with our show, we've always put it forth as a co-viewing experience, that the parents should sit down with their kids and watch it. That's good. And luckily for us, it's like over 80% of parents are reporting that that's what they're doing. They're watching the episode with their kids. Now, they don't watch it the second, third, fourth, fifth, and 10th time like their kids do, but they'll sit down and they'll watch it. They'll enjoy it because we've put in probably 2 out of every 3 jokes is right over the top of the heads of the 8-year-olds, and it's really hitting more for my demographic and Connor's. And so we've got a lot of humor in there that adults can appreciate, similar to like a Pixar movie. But you want to be consuming things with your kids, and you want to be following up with conversations and not just have it be completely turn off the brain time. As much as we want to be that, you need to be able to follow up with engaging conversations and critical thinking on it in order to really really integrate those lessons into your family, or kind of fend them off if they've been exposed to something that they shouldn't.
That's good.
What Daniel just said, I want to emphasize, and that is, this is a family-centric, in-home model. We're not, with the books, we try and get them into schools and get teachers sharing them. But ultimately, the problem that you face when you try and teach things in school to kids is that they'll come home at the end of the day. Mom will say, "Hey, honey, how was your day?" "Fine." "What did you learn today?" "I don't know." Right. And there's a disconnect between parent and child, and there's no support system, therefore no retention and application. So what Daniel said is critical, because we want, both with the cartoon and the books, we want that to be a joint experience so that parents and kids have the same language. So when the dad is, at the store with his son, he can point something out that has a reference to that story in a cartoon episode or in a book, and the kid gets it, and they can use that as a foundation for an amazing conversation. But if parents and kids aren't speaking the same educational language, they're unable to really build together and create something with that. So we, 99% of everything that we do is focused on getting these resources into the home, getting parents and kids watching and reading this content together, because ultimately, I don't think we're going to save our country at the Capitol or in the courtroom, as important as it is for us to engage in those venues. Sure. I think we're going to say, if we're going to save our country, it's at the dinner table, and it's by focusing on building up these families and the rising generation.
Yeah, man, that's good. That's so important. Just those personal conversations. I talk to parents all the time who are struggling with their kids, and One of the questions I'll always ask, and they laugh, is, do you guys have dinner together? Do you sit down and have dinner together? Do you, what does your time together look like? Oh, we always spend time together on the couch watching TV or whatever. But just creating space where you can have those conversations. And then, like you said, having the resources that provide the language around those is so important. I'll ask this as the last question. Are you, and this will be for both of you, are you optimistic about the impact that we can have on our country? It's a desperate place right now. I mean, you watch the news, you listen to whatever, you talk to friends, and it feels like we have gone over the precipice, that there's no coming back from this, that we're just trying to hang on long enough. Are you optimistic about the direction, not that the country's going necessarily, but the opportunities that we have?
I'll say yes. I mean, it's the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I am optimistic about our abilities to impact, starting first, like Connor said, with our own families, and then those in our communities. And I think strong families are really at the center of a strong nation. And the more we can fortify those and really share, like Connor was saying, the same educational language and foundation and that critical thinking in those conversations, the better off we're going to be. And I think there's more and more people waking up to the fact that this will not be won by getting your guy in for president. There's no president that's coming in to like save the day. This has really got to start from a much more local level. And I think more and more people are getting are really waking up to that, and that is exciting. And I don't know what that looks like in the long term as far as how much the pendulum swings back the other direction, or how much things fall apart, and then we're in a better position to pick up pieces and rebuild. I don't know what that looks like, but either way, I can be optimistic for the battle that we're fighting, and that it can be very much a bright future. There's going to be a lot of dark times, but you've always got to hang on to that light.
That's good. That's good.
For my part, depending on the day you ask me, I'm either an optimistic pessimist or a pessimistic optimist. And I go back and forth between the two. Here's how I look at my work. I feel like we're in the Titanic and we're about to hit the iceberg, and we can't course correct fast enough. There is going to be a hard time. We've kicked the can, so to speak, so much on the debt, and look at the moral and spiritual and the familial and the societal, things going on in our society. I think that we've been living at the expense of the future for a very long time. And so I think there's going to be a reckoning of some sort. I think the Titanic is going to, crash. Where I see my role is not in trying to course correct and somehow miraculously, spare the Titanic. It's to get as many families on the lifeboats as possible, to where they can more nimbly go around obstacles and get to safety. It's reaching and teaching as many families as possible while we yet have time to do so, so that economically, spiritually, even from a temporal preparedness standpoint of just having basic emergency preparedness stuff, like just being ready to weather storms that may be coming. And so I don't have delusions of grandeur that we're going to, stop Leviathan from doing all these crazy, horrible things. I think there is a reckoning, and, when you reap the whirlwind, then things are just going to happen. But in the meantime, we can do a lot of good, and we can help a lot of people get them on those lifeboats. And that's where I see my work as.
Yeah, that's great.
Pessimistically optimistic. It's nice.
There you go. I'll take it.
Great term I'm going to start using, because I feel like I'm right there most of the time. Where can people, Connor, learn more about you and the work that you're involved in, and then Daniel about Angel Studios and the Tuttle Twins, of course, but you guys have so much going on, and it's all pretty exciting, at least from where I sit.
Well, thank you. So Tuttle Twins, the books are at TuttleTwins.com. We've got books from toddlers through teens and curriculum and podcasts and all kinds of stuff. That's at TuttleTwins.com. If you'd like to learn more about me, it's ConnorBoyack.com, or you can just Google my name. And then our nonprofit think tank, where we do a lot of legal reform, is Libertas.org. And I'll kick it over to Daniel.
Awesome.
Yeah, they can look us up at TuttleTwins.tv, so different than .com. or they can download the Angel app, which is available on Android and on iPhone. And if they download that, then they can watch the full first season and coming season 2 for free. The episodes are available there to stream, as long as hit shows like The Chosen and Dry Bar comedy. So that's all available there too. Awesome,
gentlemen. Thank you so much. I really am very grateful for the work that you do. And maybe it's age, maybe, I don't know, whatever it is. I have a son getting married in a few months, and my daughter's graduated from college. I have 2 teenagers. So maybe it is my age, but I have become so much more focused on the work that I do personally to help prepare my kids for this crazy world that they're getting involved in. And without people like you, it would be nearly impossible. So thank you so much. Please keep up the good work, and really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate the kind words.
Thanks for having us.
We were not made to live in isolation. Sadly, many of our veterans feel they need to fight their battles alone. This self-isolation has led to the staggering statistic of more than 20 veterans taking their lives every day.
A lot of guys end up drinking, a lot of guys end up losing hope. Some of them will go to the VA and they'll try to get, prescription medications to help with PTSD. They'll get pills for anxiety, they'll get pills because they can't sleep, now they'll get pills for depression before they know it. They're taking 12 different medications. And when it's not working out, these guys lose hope, and that's why there's 23 guys a day committing suicide.
The mission of Mighty Oaks is to eradicate the veteran suicide epidemic and help our warriors change their legacies. As a result, we've been able to help over 4,000 veterans and first responders by equipping them with the tools they need to live the lives they were created to live.
Everything they said just kept hitting me in the heart over and over and over again. It's like all the things that I didn't know that I needed to hear. And I opened my heart to God that week, dude, and I've been a different person ever since.
Our faith-based, peer-to-peer approach has one of the highest success rates of any program available today, offering hope and understanding to those who need it most. We provide our programs and resources, including travel, at no cost to our warriors.
I remember talking to a licensed social worker who actually handed me a pamphlet to Mighty Oaks. So I went, and I'm glad I did.
By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these men and women are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. Our mission is to serve and restore our nation's warriors and families who have endured hardship through their service to America, and to help them find new life purpose through hope in Christ. It's your generosity that can make a difference in the lives of the men and women who have fought for our country and our freedoms. Now that they're home, don't let them fight alone. Learn more at mightyoaksprograms.org. Just when you thought it couldn't get any better, Mike Lindell with MyPillow is launching the MyPillow 2.0. When Mike invented MyPillow, it had everything you could ever want in a pillow. Now, nearly 20 years later, he discovered a new technology that makes it even better. The MyPillow 2.0 has the patented adjustable fill of the original MyPillow, and now with a brand new fabric that is made with a temperature regulating thread. The MyPillow 2.0 is the softest, smoothest, and coolest pillow you'll ever own. For our exclusive listeners, the MyPillow 2.0 is buy one, get one free offer with promo code SITREP. MyPillow 2.0 temperature regulating technology is 100% made in the USA and comes with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Just go to MyPillow.com and click on the radio listener square to buy the one, get one free offer. Enter promo code SITREP or call 800-870-0283 to get your MyPillow 2.0 now. Very grateful for Daniel and Connor and their time. I've mentioned this before and had the opportunity again to talk to two of the other Harmon brothers, all involved in Angel Studios and the work that they're doing, and so grateful for folks who are using their God-given gifts, talents, and abilities to make a difference and to help equip people like me and people like you to know how to not only think about culture, but train those who are coming up behind us. Very thankful for Connor as well. And his not just concern about what's happening in his state and for his family, but helping families know how they can train their kids and learn together. Very, very grateful for that. Please go and check out the Tuttle Twins and Angel Studios. You will be happy that you did. Thank you for listening today. Really appreciate you joining the conversation. Make sure that you are subscribed, of course, on your podcast platform of choice. There is a place for you to follow along. It may say follow, it may say subscribe, maybe it says something else, but there is a place that you can hit that lets you know when these episodes are pushed out a couple times a week. We produce new episodes, want to make sure that you have access to those, so please make sure that you are subscribed. And then take some time, go over to YouTube. You can find our channel there, The Situation Report. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave us a comment, share this content out, and that would be fantastic. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to talking to you next time.